I actually hate that this memory isn't one that my mind blocks out from childhood. When I was in grade school, K through 6 here in the US, I spent more time in my school than anywhere else. My parents were ugly divorced. The kind that turned into some messed up competition of who can stick it to the other the hardest instead of, oh, I don't know, parenting. BS to bygones. I at least came out with an incredible amount of respect for my folks. Their ability to have their foot in their mouth and their head up their ass at the same time is unrivaled. Custody was 1 week at mom's, next at dad's. Rinse and repeat. One of my mom's weeks, she had to work early, so she had my stepdad take us. We were the ID Discovery X Brady Brunch crossover. He had 2 boys. My mom brought 2 girls. By this point, I'd already been conditioned to keep the secrets of adults who asked me to not tell. My meek and introverted effect brought all the predators to the yard. The 4 of us kids went to 3 different schools with different start times. The youngest got to sleep in because his school was 5 minutes from the house, so his dad would come back home to take him. The older 2 caught a bus to the middle school at 5:45 a.m. My school was close to their bus stop and started at 8:45. The 3 of us all had to be ready and out the door by 5:15 because it took about 20-ish minutes to get there. If you are following along, you are correct that the math isn't math in there. Because stepdad didn't want to make the drive 2 times, he would drop me off at a playground that was right next to my school. The setup was pretty weird. The recess/blacktop area of the school met with a little grassy area that was technically the end of the school property, with the playground to the other side of the grass. Stepdad used that as a loophole around the rule that no one could enter on school grounds until 8:25. So every weekday at my mom's, I'd get stashed at a park in a quiet neighborhood by myself for close to 3 hours. I didn't want to make him mad, so I didn't say anything to anyone. I would just swing and listen to my little red Sony CD player. I would have to sneak my mom's CDs, and I became the youngest person to know every word to an entire Disturbed album. One routine morning, I saw a man walking around at the school. I hardly ever saw anyone until closer to 8, so it's a safe bet I bluntly stared at him, giving Children of the Corn energy. He did the little nod of acknowledgement and disappeared down the hall. I didn't think much about it until I saw him during school hours. He was rolling a trash bin with that little claw grabber infomercials convinced you were an absolute necessity. That's now resigned to 99 cents at the as seen on TV aisle of a drugstore. His short had John in red stitching. Obviously, I didn't get the warm and fuzzies and run up telling him I saw him. We just repeated the stare and nod bit. I began to see him more often around the school and in the mornings. I'm not sure how long it took before I started to see him earlier and earlier. He always made sure to wave hello to me. One morning before John made his appearance, some paper blew out of my backpack and I had to run off to catch it. I was scolding my kamikaze homework for its freedom or death attempt when I heard someone really close to me. Some stringy-haired teenager was standing just off the side of the trail on the rocks. Society was still favorable of the "was up" greeting, which I mumbled back, causing him to snort and laugh. Said I had to go, but I heard him yell to be careful out there all alone as I ran back to the safety of my swing. I saw John was now at school, so I waved to him. His face was contorted into a look of annoyance, mixed with disappointment and a flash of anger. I was bummed I'd let him down, so I just looked at my feet trying not to cry. The next morning, I found a little snack and Happy Meal toy on the swing. I left it alone. This wasn't a stranger danger choice, but rather an early understanding of never touching something that's not yours. I'd assumed that they were from John. The gifts turned into weird stuff like a lone dirty sock, water bottle of what I only clocked as I got older to be piss, an open box cutter. I stopped swinging and would just sit in the entrance of the tube slide, just trying to hide myself until I could go to school. I wasn't the only one to change routine, though. John was now getting there right around the time I would be dropped off and would do a couple of laps around the park before he went to the school. Mornings had upgraded from crap to even worse crap. My stepdad was angry. I started to drag my feet getting ready and getting out of the truck, so he broke my CD player. I had nothing to occupy my mind anymore. Being headphone free added a whole other layer of what the heck. I started to hear manic laughter, loud banging, and, worst of all, animal screams emitting from the bike trail. The area was known for mountain lions, so I hoped that was the source. The next day, my stepdad had something he needed to do, so I was dropped off even earlier, much earlier than John. During my reverse Rapunzel traipse up the play tower, I saw it. It took me a solid chunk from father time for me to grasp exactly what it was I was looking at. What started as an odd-shaped orange blob turned into one of the most terrific things I'd ever seen. Laying halfway in the grass was half of a cat. I threw up down the slide. This wasn't just any cat. It was Kris Kringle, the school cat. He lived down the street and would always roam around the school. He was a happy orange idiot who loved attention. He wasn't partially eaten by some animal. He was literally clean split down the middle with his lower half nowhere to be seen. I must have been making a lot of noise because I didn't even hear John before I saw him bending down and picking up what was formerly known as Kris. He turned and looked at me and yelled at me to go. I opted to forego the vomit loop ride down the slide and Usain bolted down the crappy play structure steps. Zero plan, just straight fear-fueled sprinted as far from the pet cemetery scene. Pausing to catch my breath, I heard screaming where I accidentally turned around towards the screaming. Whatever the source was, it was coming from the bike trail. My legs stopped working as the adrenaline dump wore off. John pops out at the trailhead, looking like some blue-collar Dexter with bloody hands and a calm demeanor. That kicked my ass back into gear and I sprinted to my friend's house. I didn't know what to even say, so I just sat in a little trash bin corral on the side of the house until more of the world woke up. With a false sense of security, seeing other people around, I walked back to school like it was just another Thursday. I went to the nurse and said I was sick so I could go home. At the speed of a drunk girl seeing a 2 a.m. drive-through gossip spread. That stringy-haired teen had been found badly injured on the bike trail. Known problem for hard drugs and harassment of the young girls at the school. Returning to school, everything was right back to normal. I saw John, who did his typical nod, this time accompanied with a wink. Beyond a PSA to keep an eye out for the now missing Kris Kringle, it was like nothing had even happened. John even stopped his early arrival laps. I don't think I'll ever know who left the things on the swing, why John changed his routine, or what happened to Kris Kringle. Some friends think John was taking care of a witness to his grooming. Some think he was protecting me from a stringy-haired Shaggy. I carried that story solo until I was much older. When I volunteered at a cat sanctuary, I named an orange boy Kris Kringle in his honor. For my own sake, I tell myself that John was my helper and saved me from something potentially much worse. Probably the only way I could cope. Forcefully believing not all adults in that area had the competency of the cast of Teen Mom. Rest in peace, Kris. Back in 2012, there was a lot of buzz surrounding the US presidential election, and as a senior in high school, I didn't have a whole lot going on in my life. So I decided to join our local campaign office to help gather voter information and inform our city about our candidates. Plus, they paid pretty well, and that was a big thing for me as a high school student. While a large part of the job was phone banking and event staffing, the brunt of the work was canvassing on foot door to door throughout the neighborhoods. Anyways, on one of the days nearing election day, we had to kick into gear and knock as many doors as possible as quickly as possible. The most populated areas of town are usually hit first, so near the ends we are left with the outskirts and sketchy parts of town, such as the trailer parks. This all happened to occur in one of the trailer park neighborhoods. At a little past 9 p.m. it was pretty dark out, and although we are supposed to head back to the office and we're not supposed to ring any more doorbells after 9, I only had a handful of names left on my canvassing sheet, so I decided to hit them up on the way back to the car. We were encouraged to make round trips, starting and ending where we parked. So it's pretty dark out, and I'm painfully tired after trotting through the cold early November air for the last 5 hours. I stop at one of the trailers. These things aren't what you would expect when you think of a trailer. They're actually fairly large and pretty decent. About the size and quality of a small 2-bedroom house, and knock. The first thing I notice is the smell of this specific place. It was a stomach-churning reek of sewage and roadkill. I knock, trying to collect myself and get over the smell before they come up, and as I wait, I casually glance in their window. That may sound like a creepy thing to do, but every canvasser we worked with admitted to doing it. It was only somewhat a curiosity thing. And it was neat trying to guess what somebody's personality was like based on their furniture and whatnot. The strange thing was that there was no furniture in there. The kitchen was barren, and the only thing in the trailer was around a dozen containers of bleach. What was even more strange was that all of their lights were on and their driveway was full, so they had to be home, but still no answer. I don't know what it was, but the place just gave me an incredibly uncomfortable vibe. I assumed that they were probably just busy or ignoring me, so after about a minute of waiting, I listed them as unavailable and started moving to the next trailer. As I was walking away, I heard the sound of the door unlocking, so I halted and turned back toward the door. A chubby man in a white wife beater and jeans opened the door. The first thing that I noticed about him was that he looked absolutely filthy, like he hadn't showered in weeks. The little hair that he had was crusted with grease. His face was blackened with grime. His shirt had deep sweat stains all along the sides. His jeans were covered in bleach stains, and he had a ton of brown splatter stains covering his shirt. I didn't think much of it at the time, since after months of knocking doors, I'd seen all walks of life, from people answering the door naked to people that were so dirty and smelled so much like feces that you had to hold back gags when speaking. The other thing that I noticed when I approached the door was that behind the man was a huge pile of bleached, ripped out brown carpeting. Again, I was pretty tired at this point and hadn't gotten much sleep for the last few days, so I didn't make too much of it. I was just ready to get it over with and hit up the next place. The first thing he says is just, "Who are you?" And judging from his voice and the way he was standing, it was very obvious that he had been drinking quite a bit. I start the script, introduce myself and why I'm here, and ask if Sarah, the name that the address was listed under, is there. He just chuckles and says, "Nope." I ask if he's her husband or related to her, and he replies with a snicker. Yeah, sure. Sarah and I go way back." Finally, I ask if she's going to be home the next few days, and what he said made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He chuckled again and said, "I don't think Sarah will be coming back." At this point, I'm thinking that this guy is either just incredibly creepy, a murderer, or the two recently got out of a breakup or something. I'm generally a pretty rational person, I like to think, though, so I figured that it was likely the latter and I was probably overreacting. I thank him for his time and start to leave, but he asked if I wanted to come in and enjoy a beer. I wasn't of age yet, and we were under no circumstances supposed to enter anyone's house, so I declined and thanked him for the offer, but he persisted. He says that he has soda in there. Again, I politely declined. He asked what my favorite soda is and says that he probably has it. I'm just creeped out and don't know what to say. He also says he also had tea or coffee if I would like that instead. And remember, I saw his kitchen. It was completely barren aside from the bleach bottles, so there wasn't a coffee machine or sodas or anything to be found. Again, I say nothing and just stand there uncomfortably. He said, "How about you just come in for a few minutes to chat?" And I'm just really creeped out by the fact that he's trying so hard to get me to come into his, or technically Sarah's, trailer. I refuse once again, explaining that our policy doesn't allow us to go into people's homes and that I've still got other people left on my list. But he still doesn't let down, saying that nobody has to know and that it's pretty late and I am welcome to spend the night there. I'm pretty freaked out at this point and refuse again, so he just says, "Well, how about I just drive you home and we can chat on the way?" I turn around and start walking away, saying behind me, "I'm really sorry, I have to go." He follows me off his porch and I pick up my pace. He gets in his truck and drives down the dirt road right beside me, even though I'm almost running at this point. He rolls down the window and starts yelling that he just wants to talk and asking me to get in and let him drive myself home. I immediately turn around and sprint in the other direction toward my car. I get in and see his headlights drive past me, likely still looking to see where I went. Once he's a good distance away, I turn on my car, get on the road, and floor it, going probably close to 90 miles per hour on a 35 miles per hour road. The entire time I'm driving, I'm trying to catch my breath in between hyperventilating and trying to push back tears. I didn't bother stopping by the office and drove straight home. I didn't tell anybody about what happened for a few days, and I had never been more relieved to see my parents. I also didn't show up to work for the next several days, which I still feel a bit bad about since that was when they needed me the most. I had considered going to the police with it every day for the next week or two, but somehow talked myself out of it every time. Mostly because I didn't want to get involved in it and I didn't want to get brought in for questioning. After about a week, I realized that it would probably be the right thing to do, but at that point I figured he was probably gone and going to the police probably wouldn't do a whole lot anyways. But now I still regret not going to the police at any point. Every single day for the next month or so, I would watch the news and read the paper, looking to see if there's any news about Sarah or the guy I saw. But since it was literally less than a week from election day, that's pretty much all I ended up reading about and seeing. Anyways, the funny thing is that after the incident, I realized how fragile life really was. So it helped me to get over my deep depression and convinced me to leave my toxic SO of the time. So, I guess a bit of good did come out of it in a strange way. But still, to this day I'm terrified of trailer parks and knocking on strangers' doors. And I don't think that I'm going to be helping out much this next election cycle. This happened to me 4 years ago. At the time, I was 17 years old and had been offered a job at a classmate's mom's mini market. Here in my country, I'm in South America for context, those are pretty common and sell everything from frozen food to bathroom necessities. Usually people will build a tiny separate building next to their house for it and work the store themselves. Every condo and village, these seem to mean something entirely different here, has about one on every main street. Anyways, my classmate's mom offered me to work there, Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., with some pretty good cash and free lunch. He lived about a mile away and my house was directly connected to his by a cycle path, so I would get to use my brand new bike as a means of transportation. Basically the perfect job for me. I did not enjoy working there though. Don't get me wrong, I do like working and I like money, but this store had too much going on in it. So I had to make ice cream cones, bag chicken breasts, laminate ham and cheese. Again, I think those things already come laminated in most countries. Work the coffee machine and keep everything immaculate and in order, while checking that all the stuff this lady had in her store wasn't expired. Keep in mind, I'm talking January 2014, and I found a bag of sausages expired on January 2013 being sold during my first week there. Overall, it wasn't really abusive, she just didn't know how to manage her store or her money. That's a completely different story though. But, by the way, ex-boss, let's never meet again, because man, your store was unsanitary AF. Anyhow, one of my many jobs there was keeping an eye on fruit and veggies, meaning checking for the rotten ones and throwing them away and refilling the damn tomatoes if the shelf was emptying. There was only one huge problem for me as a 5'4", 120-pound girl: the 45-pound potato sack. For context, right in front of the store, there was a huge green area, and we have public workers, gardeners who take care of it. They have one specific person in charge of specific areas, so the same man would always be there doing his job. Let's call him Pete. Back when only my boss and her family worked the store, they would ask Pete for help to take the potatoes from the car and drop them at the back of the store. He would always help, and the only thing he asked for as payment was a cup of coffee and a sandwich. This man was in his late 50s, didn't go through education, he couldn't read and usually asked me to read the newspaper to him. And even though he didn't seem to have any kind of mental handicap, he would not understand that there are limits to how you approach people and what is and isn't appropriate. More on that later. Anyways, whenever we had to take the potatoes out of the car, my boss would phone him and he would come in quickly, as he had a red bike with an engine attached to it. Everybody was comfortable with him, and he was just an old man who helped with the heavier duties and asked for very little in return. As I started learning the job, my boss wouldn't be around to help me when I had doubts, meaning I was completely alone in the store. I would struggle by myself with moving the potatoes from the back of the store and would often lose a piece of a fingernail or something. Because of this, whenever she left, she would ask the gardener to keep an eye on me and help me with it. The problem began pretty quickly. I have interacted many times with people with conditions. And I'm not trying to be rude, but when someone has some kind of mental health issue or syndrome, even if they can normally function and even have jobs, you can kind of tell. And I assure you, this man was completely healthy and normal. Looking back, I think he was using his lack of education as a way to shield his behavior, and so people pitied him and felt guilt for not liking him, and tried to take advantage of the girls who worked there. There had been some before me. I never met them. He would fixate on certain topics, always repeat the same conversations, and become way too close to me and my coworker, another classmate. He would stand up too close and talk some very personal problems with me. Keep in mind, he was 30 plus years older. I was underage. He became another one of the many unpleasant duties I had to deal with on a daily basis. As the weeks progressed, he gave me his phone number so I could call him when I needed assistance. I never called him because I, of course, didn't want to be around him, and because I'm the kind of person who thinks they don't need help. When he realized I wasn't calling him, he tried to push me into giving him my number. I never did, so he would stay right in front of the store and come in every 20 minutes. He gave me a bicycle seat, and even though I told him I didn't want it and he could keep it, thanks a lot, he removed my original brown seat and put the one he got me. He would tell me he was single and owned a house, would call me pretty and tried to play with my hair, etc. I was severely uncomfortable around him, but nobody seemed to be bothered by any of those things. It made me feel awkward and guilty for feeling these things, which only contributed to the already disappointing feeling of working in this unsanitary place. I decided to just do my best to ignore him. When he realized I was distant, he started accusing me of being mean, with my boss, but nothing else. It was only a summer job, so I thought I just had to stand it for a month and it would be over, but oh no. One good day, 2 weeks before I had to leave, he told me he was in love with me. Dead serious too. I was 17 and had no experience with love and such. I had never had anyone tell me something like that. Usually I am a very short-tempered person and snap easily and could have told him to stop messing with me, but this just left me speechless. He had already been flirting with me for 2 months. Even though I was underage, he had given me presents. I had seen him lift 2 potato sacks on one shoulder, and he could certainly do as he pleased with me. I started to sweat. I was feeling violated, and even when he wasn't trying to approach me, he just stared so deeply into my eyes that it was clear he was trying to make me feel inferior. I didn't know what to do, and he wasn't leaving the store. My boss arrived like 10 minutes after this, so we started chatting with her, but I was left feeling violated for the rest of my shift. 2 weeks after, my contract ended, or the summer. I thought I would never see him again, but again, oh no. There are green areas where I live too. One day as I was walking my dog, I saw a bright red bike with an engine attached to it next to some swings in the park. I recognized it. It was his bike. He saw me and ran towards me, crossing the street even though cars were coming. I have 3 dogs. One is a pit bull mix and the other is a husky mix. The third one a Yorkie, before you ask, lol. And none of them liked him. You would think my big-ass dogs would stop him from standing too close to me, but nope. And he only took a few steps back when my pit tried to bite his hand. I had never seen them so angry. He told me his boss had realized he was slacking on the job to help at the store and he didn't like that, so he was moved to another area away from my store. He insisted on asking where my house was, just like he insisted on my phone number back in the day. My house was a quarter of a mile away. I told him I lived in the opposite direction because, of course, I didn't want to tell him where I lived. That day, I told my mom about this creepy old man and all the things he had done at that point. She yelled at me for not snapping at him or something, like she didn't understand this man could carry 2 of those potato sacks. I asked her to not tell my dad because he would get mad at me. Yeah, they are the kind of parent who gets mad at their kids for things that aren't their fault. They once yelled at my brother when he had his phone stolen on the bus by a guy with a knife. Mom did tell, though. The next day, my father mysteriously offered to walk the dogs, and the next day after that, Pete wasn't around to be seen. Mom told me later that my dad approached Pete and threatened him. Knowing my dad, he probably told him about his military background and his gun. Pete asked to be moved to any other area right there, with his boss on speaker and my dad listening. My city is pretty small, so I still see him when I go on longer walks about 4 miles from my house, but he no longer tries to talk to me. Instead, he keeps his head down and starts moving faster in the opposite direction. So, goodbye, you old creep. Let's not frickin' meet again. New here. I am a paralegal for a criminal defense attorney. We have shady clients. On a Friday, I was the only one in the office. A man comes in with a large ski jacket, fingerless gloves, and a plastic WWF belt. He's asking me all these questions of how much we would charge, what he gets for his money, etc. I ask what his charges are, and he leans against the wall and tells me. This won't take long. He goes on a tangent about how the government is out to get him, and they broke his taillights so he would be pulled over. He's also looking around the lobby. We have security cameras and a locked door from the lobby with a keypad, but I'm on the other side of a large cutout. He's acting really strange and isn't really talking anymore, just kind of mumbling. Just then, the doors open and a friend who works in the next office pops her head in and says, did you get that email? I haven't heard a response. And then goes back to her building. Weirdo angrily yells, "What is she doing? Checking up on you?" And then he takes all the business cards on the table and our sign that shows what payments we take and runs into the woods. My friend comes back and asks if I saw him before he walked in, and I hadn't, as I was in the back office. She says he was looking in the cars in the parking lot and was trying to open my car door. So, weird ski jacket in July wrestling mania guy, let's not meet again. I've been wanting to share this story here for some time now, but haven't gotten around to it. This took place about a year and a half ago now. For context, I'm male and was 24 at the time. Apologies for it not being super neat and well written. I spent a few hours just writing all of this, and I'm calling it there. It was early November in 2024, and it was one of the last days that the Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio, would be open for the season. I had spontaneously decided in the week leading up to the day that I wanted to go before they shut down for the winter. After all, I had a 24 gold pass I hadn't utilized to its full potential. Unfortunately, I could not find anyone to go with on such short notice. My wife, fiance at the time, was having chronic stomach issues and couldn't handle the rides anymore. Any friends of mine I tried asking were busy that day, so I said, you know what, I'm 24 years old now. Super introverted, familiar with the park, and just wanted to ride some rides. I'll go by myself. Why not? I can have fun anyway, just riding rides and not having to wait on anyone or go with anyone else's flow. So I send it. The day comes and I drive 3 hours from my home in Michigan to Sandusky, Ohio, as I have many times in the past. Cedar Point was nothing new to me. Little did I know I was in for quite the shit show. I was about to meet quite the creepy character there. I arrive later in the day, around maybe 3 p.m., and go straight to the Millennium Force roller coaster and begin waiting in line. In front of me is a short, bald, clean-shaven guy, about my age, in a plain hoodie and jeans. Not conventionally attractive at all. Think dainty Discord mod. He strikes up some talk with me about the coaster, which I entertain, perhaps too enthusiastically as a total Cedar Point geek. As the line progresses, this rapidly evolves into him opening up to me about him being autistic, claiming savage style, and saying that he was smarter than most people, asking my thoughts on that, asking a lot of random questions about me and what I do, leading me to give away my birthday, where I go to college, the retail chain I worked at, and very roughly where I lived in Michigan, give or take 20 miles. I wasn't so reckless as to say the town, and finally saying that he wanted to ride the coaster with me. At this point, there was really no red flags yet in my mind though. I was just trying to be very kind and friendly, as I got the impression that not a lot of people treated him as such. though I did try to put my foot down when he suggested we continue to ride together throughout the day and said that I really came there that day with the intention to enjoy my own company and agency. In hindsight, I should have said right there and then that I was meeting friends later. Disclaimer: from here on, I have absolutely no backbone, and make some really stupid decisions in the name of trying to be nice and unoffensive to this guy. I have always had a tendency to be pretty submissive and people-pleasing. I want to say that I am painfully aware of how dumb and spineless I was from here on out in this story, so please try not to rub it in too hard. We get off the ride and he asks again, "So, you're sure you don't want to just stick together?" I reiterate my previously mentioned sentiment. He goes on to ask things like, "Is it something I did? Is it because I'm autistic? People always do this to me." Should have been a red flag there, but instead I try and console him by saying stuff like, "Oh, of course not, man. It's nothing personal. You're great. I'm just very introverted and just came here with my own plan in my mind." He half accepted that answer and then asks almost desperately, "How about just one more ride and then you can go?" And me, with no backbone or awareness of how this is going to play out for the rest of the evening and feeling bad for him, I say fine, we can do one more. So we make our way to another coaster, Maverick. While in line for Maverick for an hour, things were fine for the most part. He told me that he was gay and talked about that for a bit. I was just like, okay, cool, man. Good for you for being open about it. Not something I would typically even be bothered to mention, except it's important later in the story. Then he asked me if I was, and I told him I'm engaged to a woman. He asks me my thoughts on people being gay, and of course I'm nice about it because I don't care. Also ending up on politics for a bit, and finding out that he was gay and a massive Trump supporter was actually perplexing to me. But anyways, we get through the line after about an hour. We get off Maverick and I prepare to go my own way, and surprise, he's asking me again if we could just stick together, or one more ride and guilt-tripping me about people and how they always leave him. And like a spineless broken record, I'm consoling him again saying, "It's not you, it's me." And then, fine, we can do one more and that's it, so we make our way to Steel Vengeance. In line for Steel Vengeance, he begins to go on about how there's this handsome guy in his life that is a friend of his who he has feelings for, and that he doesn't know if he should confess his feelings to him. He becomes quite adamant about getting my take on it, saying, "If you were in my shoes, what would you do?" I ask him, "Well, is this friend also gay?" To which he responds, I don't know. I think he might be straight, but I'm not entirely sure." I just tell him, "Well, you definitely want to figure that out, because if your friend is straight and you confess feelings, it's gonna be weird." And he was kind of bummed out for the rest of the line after that. It slowly dawned on me that I was the guy, 90% sure anyways. We exit Steel Vengeance and the sun is setting at this point. I try really hard to put my foot down, reiterating firmly that it's been great, but I really wanted to spend more time at the park by myself, that it has nothing to do with him. I'm just introverted, and I understand what he's going through. But he's not buying it. He's in guilt trip override at this point, and I'm beginning to get very uncomfortable, yet somehow still also feeling bad for the guy. I'm just like, we can walk and I'll think about it, so I can stop the discomfort for a moment. We stop while heading back towards the front of the park because he needs to use the restroom and he's extremely hesitant to go in. He asked me multiple times, "You're not going to leave me if I go to the bathroom, are you?" I've had people do that to me before. Of course I'm like, "No dude, I would never do that." And I meant it. I wouldn't conceive of ditching an autistic person at a bathroom in an amusement park. But I won't lie, the idea was tempting. I told myself if I'm going to leave him, I'm going to have some decency and say it to his face, not ditch him at a bathroom. But honestly, in hindsight, maybe I should have, just with this individual particularly. He gets done and we keep walking towards the front, and I think of a brilliantly stupid idea. I'm like, "How about you give me your phone number, and if I'm here by myself next year, I'll hit you up." He's kind of like, "Alright, yeah, I guess," and gives me his number. And of course, how did I not see it coming? He says, "Can you text it so you're in my phone too?" I am completely unable to think fast enough on my feet of an excuse as to why I couldn't do that, so I just cave and do it. Now he has my number. We keep walking and he asks me, "What's your last name so I can put it in my contacts?" and I politely but firmly decline, explaining that I don't know him well enough to give my last name. He gets somewhat offended by that and is like, "What would I do with that info?" "It's just for my phone contacts. Do you think I'm going to stalk you or something?" And I'm just like, "No, of course not. I'm a cautious person. I don't give my full name to people I don't know." He proceeds to be kind of annoyed but dropped it. He then asks me shortly thereafter where I live, and just like earlier that day in line for the Millennium, I give a rough idea, only naming the city I live 30 minutes outside of. And he's like, "No, specifically what town do you live in? I go to blank in southern Michigan for work. Maybe we can meet up sometime." And again, I have to be like, "Look man, I don't know you very well. I'm not comfortable sharing that with you." He gets offended again, like I'm making him out to be some creepy stalker. And he says, "We've gotten to know each other all day. You can trust me with that." He proceeds to pull up Google Maps on his phone and show me exactly where he lives, even zooming in on the house and being like, "See? Now you can show me." And I still hold my ground because I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb. Again, he's irritated, but he drops it. At this point, I'm mentally and emotionally exhausted and also getting kind of scared. It's become clear that this person is deeply insecure, and I'm not sure what he's willing to do if I make him upset enough. And I am 24, by myself, a whole state away from home, and nobody I know, and it's getting dark out. At least I'm in public, thankfully. So I begin to just BS and say that my fiance is not feeling well, and I need to get home to take care of her. He kind of understands, but also half disregards it and is like, "Well, please, one last thing. I swear, just ride the power tower with me before you leave." He does his same guilt trip ritual, and I don't know why at this point, but I caved. Maybe because I'm exhausted, uncomfortable, and low-key a little bit scared at this point. I've never been on the ride. Honestly, kind of scared of the ride, but it's like I'm paralyzed at this point, on unwanted autopilot. We get in line and he's over the moon. He begins to prattle on about how he loved to ride this with his ex-boyfriend. So, now picture me standing in line with this guy, autistic creeper who's all giddy now, probably fantasizing about me. I'm standing before a ride shaped so much like a penis, it's uncanny. I'm terrified to ride it. Kind of terrified of him and beginning to question at what point I am justified in laying this autistic guy out flat in public. And all while just feeling like such a pitiful, spineless coward for letting it go this far. We board the ride, and as we are slowly ascending into the sky, he begins to question if he's making me uncomfortable and says that he always feels like he makes people uncomfortable and pushes people away. I don't really know why, but I kind of switch my tone a bit now, and I decide to be real with him, thinking maybe I would get through to him. I tell him, "Look man, it's not really your fault because understanding social cues and reading people's emotions is hard with autism. I understand that, I really do. But when you guilt trip people for wanting to leave and have their own agency and ask very personal questions on day one of meeting a total stranger, you're going to make them uncomfortable and push them away." The ride drops us out of the sky and bounces us a few times. We get off and he's kind of quiet and seems confused. We're walking now in the main midway at the front of the park, and he kind of starts to rationalize his behavior and explain why he still doesn't understand why people leave him. I kind of just calmly reiterate what I said on the ride, and he goes quiet again for a minute. He stops and looks down. I stop and glance over at him. He slowly looks up at me with a sinister looking face and says slowly, "Do you ever just drive real slow past a friend's house and watch them?" And I respond in a very concerned tone, "Oh no, I've never done that," and keep walking, thinking like, okay, things are getting serious. I need to break this off now, and if I can't, it's fight or flight. I sprint out of here, or if he gets threatening and touches me, I defend myself. He starts to backpedal and act like the slow car stalking thing was supposed to be a funny joke. And I just turn to him and I'm like, "Look man, this has been real great. Had fun, it was nice to meet you. I have to go now. Bye." And I begin to walk, keeping my stance sort of towards him in preparation for anything. Thankfully, he just sort of froze up and stood there, and I was able to get some distance and start making my way up front fast. I don't believe he followed me, but regardless, I walked really fast, looking back every 10 seconds or so, scanning for him, waiting for him to be hot in my trail. Finally get to my car, which was parked like 20 rows of cars out in the parking lot. Got in my car, locked the doors, let out the most exasperated "what the heck," and called my fiance. She calmed me down and we laughed about it as I began to drive home. All the while, still paranoid and remaining so for the coming weeks and months, wondering if he had enough information. First name, birthday, about a 20-mile range of where I lived, phone number, where I attended school, and chain I worked for, as well as willingness and smarts to find me. A year and a half later, though, I haven't gotten a single text or call from him, or any indication of being stalked. And I keep a gun in our apartment now, partially due to that encounter. I know that I was incredibly dumb, naive, and cowardly throughout this entire day with this guy. It's honestly quite embarrassing even to this day that I let that happen and that I let it progress to the point it did before actually putting my foot down and walking away. I let it ruin a whole day I had planned for myself, enjoying my favorite fun pastime. At the end of the day, it was a great lesson in setting boundaries with strangers who are kind of odd while in a different state alone. LOL. I'm honestly thankful for the experience now, because if that hadn't happened and played out the way it did, who knows how else I would have had to learn that lesson. I can't believe I had forgotten about this, but here's another. I was 15 years old, and back in those days, you would usually catch my friends and me at the big AMC movie theater. It's a huge theater. Kind of reminds me of an airport almost. And it was a popular hangout for kids that age on weekends. I remember going to the movies one night with friends, and a group of guys approached us. We started chatting and flirting as you do at that age. They said they went to one of the local high schools. One of the guys I was talking to eventually asked for my phone number, and I gave it to him. I was naive and thought this was harmless. These were the days before cell phones were everywhere, so I gave him my phone number. He called me maybe a day or two after that, and we talked for a little bit. We had a few more phone conversations here and there before he asked me on a date. As we made plans to meet, he told me that he needed to tell me something. He admitted that he wasn't actually 16 or whatever age he said he was, and he wasn't in high school. He was 22. I fell silent trying to think of my response, but there was more. Not only was he 22, he had been in prison and was recently released. Why? Accessory to murder for being in the car when his friend shot someone while driving by. I still remember the feeling of being frozen in fear. I calmly said that I didn't want to talk to him anymore and to please never call me again and hang up. After I hung up, the phone immediately started ringing. I picked it up before I could even say hello. This man had called back and was already screaming at the top of his lungs into the phone. I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but it was along the lines of, "Don't you effing hang up on me ever again," calling me every name in the book. So I hung up again, this time leaving the phone off of the receiver. I remember being so scared to tell my parents because I didn't want them to be disappointed in me. They were always so proud of me for making good decisions. It was my fault after all, giving some guy I just met my phone number, so I didn't say anything at first. The calls kept coming, but to keep my parents in the dark, I usually made sure I was the one answering the phone when it rang. He told me that he put my phone number into a reverse phone directory and found my address. He would call and say things like, "I like your sister's new green car," to make sure I knew he was watching the house. Around this time, I developed a fear of being home alone. I couldn't be alone even for a minute, so if my parents and sister were ever gone, I would call a neighbor friend to spend time with me. One night, my parents were in bed, but my sister and I were up late watching TV. We saw a car pull into our driveway and sit there with the lights on. Couldn't see who it was, but I knew. After that, everything stopped. I remember thinking how crazy it was that he had done all of that and then just disappeared. A year, maybe 2 years later, I was sitting at home watching the finale of American Idol. It's funny the little random details you remember when something significant happens, huh? And the phone rang. The caller ID said it was coming from a correctional facility. Confused, I answered it. It was a collect call from you-know-who. I couldn't believe it. I obviously didn't accept the call and hung up. Never heard from him again. I told my parents about this years later, and they said, "No wonder you were so scared to be alone." I should have told them at the time because it could have escalated even further. This story mirrors a similar experience I had a year ago, one that I posted here. I really do wonder if there is something about me that attracts these people. One lapse in judgment can lead to situations like these. To all the creepy men I've encountered in my life, let's not meet again. Edit. I actually forgot to mention this part. It's still very upsetting to think about. On one of his harassing phone calls, he described how he saw a dog get hit by a car on the highway, and the whole time he was laughing. Not in a way that was just intended to scare me, although that was the point. He was laughing like he genuinely found it funny. This person was an absolute psychopath. This was about 10 years ago now. I was walking down the street with two buddies of mine. We just had a wicked dinner and we were heading to a friend's for a party. Now, I'm in downtown Calgary. It's brightly lit where we were. A few people around. Nothing too crazy for a Tuesday. Anyways, we are absorbed in our conversation, and I get this weird feeling that somebody was watching or following us. I turn my head and look behind us, and sure enough, about a block away from us is a guy that looks pretty mean. He looks about 6.5 feet tall, covered in tattoos, bald, in combat boots, and wearing the regular punk gear. Us being punks too, we didn't think too much of it, but me being 5'0" and 90 pounds on a rainy day holding a brick if I'm lucky, was thoroughly creeped out. So we keep walking and I turn back to see if he's still there. Sure enough, he was now speed walking towards us, closing the gap pretty quick. The next time I had looked, he was right behind us and he looked beyond mad. So I do the logical thing and run. Just took right off. My buddies scattered. I heard this guy behind me and start screaming for him to back off. And what did I do? So he catches up to me and scoops me. By this time, no word of a lie. He is not the 6.5 feet I thought. He is 7.5 feet of angry punk. He growls and throws me into a garbage can and proceeds to kick the can over. All the while I was screaming. Finally, I stopped being rolled around and kicked. He pulls me out and apologizes. Says he thought I was someone else. Dusts me off and walks away. I was pretty angry at myself at this point and I marched up to him. Since I basically only come up to his ribcage, I punched him in the butt and told him that he should make sure he knows who someone is before just randomly beating people. He laughed and just kept walking. Never seen him again. My buddies ended up running to the party and left my butt. I just went home. Creeps. Before I write this out, I want everyone to know that it made zero sense to me at the time, and it's still a difficult story to tell because of that. Here we go. When I was like 8, 9, maybe 10, my parents and I went to the mall one weekend in Jax, Florida, like we did all the time. We were walking back to our car and a woman walking with a limp approached us. Let it be known that my dad walks with a pretty clear limp. She asks us if we can give her a ride to the Home Depot across the street because her car is over there and it's out of gas or something. She explains herself one or two more times and changes the destination, also to Lowe's, then back to Home Depot. Only one of these places is actually across the street, which I think was more like 6 lanes of traffic with no ability to cross, so it isn't so crazy. My parents are kind, somewhat gullible people, so they said sure. Because it was the right Christian, their words, thing to do, and it was. I was sketched out by her immediately just because it seemed really weird. She just keeps talking and trying to give us different explanations for why she needs a ride. We get to the car and I accidentally dump all of my stuff out of my back seat onto the ground, to stall time just because I'm really creeped out. I take my sweet time doing this. My dad starts the car and we are about to drive when a cop approaches the car and tells us we shouldn't give this woman a ride as she is a former/wanted criminal. This is the part that doesn't make sense. Maybe I misheard something, but I remember him stopping us and being adamant about not giving her a ride as it was a bad idea. She got out of the car and walked away normally with no limp. I'm guessing she was a grifter, a homeless person, or just a petty former/current criminal who did stuff like this all the time. It just bothers me knowing that she could have mugged my parents or hurt me/them. Maybe it's not as creepy as some of the stories here, but for me, it's more about what could have happened. This story is very unusual. It didn't necessarily happen to me, as it happened to all of my family. As a result, I have asked a few questions to place everything together. A bit of background is necessary. I have been in Canada for the majority of my life, but I was born in Iran, where I spent the first 8 years of my life. Also, it may be important to note that my dad had already gone to Canada to get things set up, get a house, a job, etc., so we could join him. In the meantime, it was just my mom, my 2 older but still teenage sisters, and me, the token man in the house. I do not recall this original incident, but since I figure this story will make the most sense chronologically, this is where we must begin. My mom got a phone call one day. A woman told her that a document had arrived for her and that she should wait for it to be delivered. My mom obviously got excited. This was the time where we were working on immigrating to Canada, so she waited and waited. No documents. Maybe a wrong number. Maybe somebody messing with her. Whatever. A few weeks later, in the middle of the night, my mom gets another phone call. It's that woman again. She asks my mom if she is still waiting for the documents. My mom is still convinced that there was just a miscommunication until the woman tells her, "Wait, I'm going to come over tonight," and hangs up. I remember this night because my mom freaked out and called some good family friends who came over and spent the night. Nobody showed up. My mom says that the woman called occasionally, once every couple of months or so, and whenever my mom asked her name, she would hang up. Fast forward, we have been in Canada for close to a decade. We are 2 continents and an ocean away. This incident is pretty much forgotten. One day the phone rings. My mom picks it up and starts talking to a Persian woman. This woman seems to know everyone fairly well, asking how they are and all of that. My mom starts to wonder who she's talking to, but every time she asks, this woman changes the subject. They have a long conversation and hang up, feeling better about it. Such a pleasant phone call. She calls again tomorrow. My mom again has a long conversation with her, but she's slightly more annoyed now. She keeps pushing her for an identification until the woman finally says, "Do you remember that time when I told you that I had some documents for you?" My mom suddenly realizes who she's talking to, and this only encourages her. By the end of the month, we were receiving dozens of phone calls at all hours of the day and the night. Our house always had that ringing tune playing. We would have to resort to unplugging the phone, and when we plugged it back in, as if on cue, it would ring. At first, if somebody other than my mom answered, she would ask for her. After a while, after a few abusive comments from me and my sisters, she wouldn't talk at all if anyone other than my mom picked up. Eventually, she got bored. Unfortunately, it wasn't the type of bored we wished for. She started finding other numbers. She would call my aunts and uncles who were spread across 3 continents, as well as my dad's cell, my sister's work, and my brand new cell phone, whose number I had not given anyone, let alone this psycho woman. Not only was she getting all these numbers, but she also had a lot of information. My mom may have encouraged things a bit, because she actually used this woman for news and gossip about the family. This woman knew more about my mom's and dad's families than my mom and dad. She also found a preferred target, my mom's mother. She would call her and have chats with her. One time, she pulled a similar prank on her. She told her that she wanted to go for a ride. When my grandma looked out of her window, she claimed that there was a car there. I don't know if I believe this, but this is a woman who has access to people in 4 or 5 different countries. I don't know if I believe this, but this is a woman who has access to people in 4 or 5 different countries. No one really knows where she is. This story isn't really very chronological now that I think about it, so here are some more odd events. My parents took a trip to Iran once to visit family. They wanted it to be a surprise, so they didn't tell anyone ahead of time. They were going to get a hotel room and then drop in on some family. Except, when they got to the airport, my uncle was there to pick them up. When they asked how my uncle knew, he said that he had received a phone call saying that they were coming. Every house they visited on that road trip got a phone call while they were there. More recently, my uncle, a different one, died. It was sudden, and my mom and her siblings decided that it would be better if they didn't tell my grandma, who was living with us at this point. The news was not widespread at this point. My uncle's roommate had called my aunt, whose husband drove over and told my dad, who told my mom. Well, we get that trusty phone call, except she doesn't want to talk to my mom, but rather to my mom's mom. When my mom pushes her to tell us why, she says that she wants to tell her about her dead son. There was also a period of time where we would get a series of calls that were just white noise with some music in the background or people talking, as if somebody dialed and put the phone on the table. This woman claims that that's not her, so either we had two people constantly calling us or someone is lying. Well, this story is slowly going nowhere fast, so I'll try to provide something of a conclusion. Everybody got sick and tired of this one day and decided that something must be done. They went to the police. This woman always called from blocked numbers, and the one time when her number wasn't blocked, it was a calling card. Anyways, the police looked into it a bit and said that it was impossible to tell where she was calling from, and that we would need to hire a private detective, which we weren't going to do. Since then, the calls have been fewer. I make a point of screening all calls now, and we often get callers that don't leave a message, but it's difficult to tell if they're her or just people who don't want to leave a message. I guess we'll find out how good she is by whether or not the calls increase after I post this. After all, if she could find my new cell phone number, finding a Reddit account would be a cakewalk. You are going to be my new best friends, and you are not allowed to say no, was the sentence that I spoke, the one that struck up this amazing friendship I have with my best friend, Brooke. Ever since first grade, we've been close and have always looked out for each other. So when Brooke's parents were getting divorced, I was always there for her to talk to. She would tell me how she wished things could be different and how she couldn't pick a parent that she would want to live with. Her parents were very different in nature. Brooke's mom was a very clean and tidy person. She wasn't stuck up or anything, but she was what we would call a goody two-shoes. She always followed rules and never went crazy. She was cool and laid back, but not a risk taker. Brooke's dad was a risk taker. He was also laid back and had a general passion for Brooke, but she was the one who went out and got tattoos and stuff, while Brooke's mom sat and watched. They were a good couple, but they just couldn't work out. Brooke's dad had made several financial mistakes, and her mom just couldn't handle it, so the divorce happened, and I was there. Meanwhile, through it all, I was being a daredevil myself. You know the normal. Dyeing my hair pink, getting snake bites, getting my nose pierced and such. Just normal teenage things. For some reason, Brooke's dad was taking a big interest in what I was doing. Brooke even told me she got jealous because it seemed as if he would pay more attention to me and not her, who took after her mother's fashionable style. I put it off saying, "He is probably just trying to not hurt you. He knows you don't like this divorce, and maybe he felt like you were mad at him." I personally didn't see anything wrong. He was just curious as to what his best friend's daughter was up to. The divorce was finalized, and Brooke spent one more week with her mom, the next with her dad, the next with her mom, and so on. At first it really bothered her, but after turning 15 and then 16, she had really gotten used to the cycle. She even got excited since her mom was dating. She wanted her dad to date, but he said he was fine, that he was admiring from afar. We both tried to get it out of him, since I was always over her house. Family problems of my own might be posted as a separate story, so I was just as involved with the two parents as she was, but he never budged. Admiring from afar, I thought it was cute, but considering I just turned 16 and was still naive, I guess I didn't see that this story doesn't have a plot twist. This is where the actual story begins, I guess you could say. I was sleeping over at her dad's apartment, and it was just after this huge breakup I had. The way I remember it, it was just completely awful. I had been dating this boy for 8 months and found out he cheated on me for the most of it. I felt awful, and Brooke was doing all she could to cheer me up, telling me I was better than him, that I'll go places and he'll have to lay his boss just to get a raise. Stuff she'd usually not say, considering I was horribly vulgar and she wasn't even a bit vulgar. After crying for what seemed like 3 hours, finally I had stopped and cheered up a little bit. Brooke was sitting on her bed and I was sitting on mine. I basically moved in at this point. I was never at my own house and always slept over at Brooke's. I had a bed there and at her mom's, which is another reason this story really bothers me. And her dad surprised us with buying us both huge things of ice cream. He sat next to me and gave me a big hug around the shoulder. He didn't need him anyway. He said for me, before getting up and going back downstairs where he was going to chill before going to work. A few hours passed, we went to bed, and I woke up with the biggest craving for a Sprite I ever had. So, being at home, I strolled downstairs and into the kitchen, where I grabbed a soda and sat at the table drinking it. It was 3 a.m. and I knew Brooke's dad would be arriving any moment. He wouldn't yell at me or anything, but I didn't want him to think anything was wrong. I felt 10 times better after realizing that he cheated on me. I did nothing wrong. Heck, I'm pretty awesome. But my confidence aside, after a few minutes, I finished my soda and decided to head back upstairs when the door opened. I turned around and I saw it was her dad. He didn't seem surprised to me since I lived there too, but he was concerned since he never came home to me being awake. "Are you okay, Cookie?" Nickname. He asked me. I nodded my head. I was just really thirsty. I proceeded to head upstairs. "I'm sorry about what happened with Jason. You didn't need him. Just keep that in your mind. You deserve someone who is mature. A man. Not a boy," he said to me, following me. I turned and smiled at him, actually a bit flattered. "Thank you, Dad." Yes, I called him Dad. I turned to go up the stairs, and he grabbed me by the wrist and brought me close. At this point, red flags were going around in my head. He practically snatched me and was pressing me against him. It wasn't like I was wearing a fur coat either. I was in this tight tank and a pair of Hello Kitty shorts that sat right below my butt. I remember this because Brooke had made a comment about how she loved that I was comfortable enough to dress around the house like it was my own. Also because Brooke's dad had said, "That tank top made your you-know-what look even bigger." I mean, it's not every day a girl has a D on their chest, let alone with one that looks good, he said. I shit you not. He said this to me and I pushed myself away. I was trying to come up with an excuse to get the heck out of there, and finally I said, "I need to go," and dashed up the stairs. I closed the bedroom door and locked it, and laid in my bed staring at Brooke. I was going to have to tell her. She wasn't going to believe me, and she was going to hate me. Why didn't I see this? Admiring from afar. What the heck? I was so confused. I pretty much just reality quit and went to bed without a second thought. But the morning did come, and with that I told Brooke and she didn't believe me. She said it was probably a dream and I laughed it off. I didn't want my best friend to hate me, and besides we were heading to her mom's that day anyways. The next week though I had to face her father again, and this is where things got too creepy for me. He'd always remind me of how I didn't need him anyway, even though I was pretty much over that jerk. He'd give me excessive hugs, stroking my back from the top of my butt to my shoulders every time. Brooke even thought it was weird. One time he full-on grabbed my butt as he hugged me, and I felt too weird to tell Brooke. At this point, her family was like mine. I felt like her sister and he felt like my dad, and I didn't want to ruin that, so I dealt with it. In my mind, it was better than having him grope me and better than losing my practical family. But then the main event happened. The night I was over her dad's and Brooke had to go do something with her mom real quick. It was an emergency and I needed to stay here because it was a personal issue that her mom didn't feel comfortable telling me. Because even though I felt like a daughter, I wasn't her real daughter. So I was alone with Brooke's dad and I was seriously fearing what would happen. Brooke was the only reason why he hadn't lunched out at me. And I say that because I swear it was to the point where he was licking his lips in my sight. I don't know what happened, if he couldn't control himself. Or what, but I knew that he had to have liked me for a while. I was up in the bedroom, sitting there and reading a book. Hopefully he would leave me alone. It was a school day and I was doing homework. He never really bothered me much when it was late anyways. He knew this was the time I did work. The hugs were when I came home, and other than that, he'd leave me be. I wish I had jumped out the window or something, because when I looked up from my book, he was standing right there, standing over me. I know I didn't tell you, but her dad was tall. Little Cookie here is only 5'3" and he was 6'2", and he was pretty in shape too. He was the type that at first glance you wouldn't expect to see tattoos and such on. He'd spike his hair up in the front and actually dress nicely since he worked at a casino. But under all of that were the tattoos and muscles, which were now standing in front of me, in boxers. It just hit me after staring for like 5 minutes. Her dad was only in boxers. "Dad," I shouted. bug-eyed and backing up my bed. He scared me. I didn't want him to know I was afraid in a different sense, because I wouldn't be able to defend myself against him. "I'm so glad we can be alone," he said, crawling up on the bed. "I've been waiting to tell you this, and I was hoping you would catch on. You don't need that Jason guy. What you need is a man like me." At this point, I wasn't even going to say anything. I ninja'd myself off the bed, hiked up my loose pajama bottoms, and hauled ass downstairs away from him. He dashed after me, yelling at me that I needed to thank him for letting me live there, and buying me nice things, and being a father for me. If he were being a father, then he would not be expecting anything like that from me, though. I ran to the kitchen and tripped on my pants. It was obvious that something like that would happen to me. I was always clumsy when I was panicked, especially. He was right behind me too, so he was able to pounce. I shit you not, right on me. As he had me down, he yanked my pants down and threw my top off. Disappointed that I had worn a tank top underneath, but not too much because it was another tight one. I layered up after the first situation. And as if from pure luck, Brooke walked into the door and found me under her father, half naked on the kitchen floor. Brooke screamed and her dad rolled off of me in a panic. "Brooke," he yelled. I rolled off the ground and rushed towards her. The bastard even licked his lips when I ran to Brooke. "Get out," she screamed, pointing towards the door, and I sincerely think she turned into Superman because my 5'5" weakling of a friend picked her father up and shoved him out the door, giving her mother a call. And that was that. That was my creepy experience. As nonchalantly as I'm ending this, it really did affect me in the way I trusted men. Brooke felt horrible for not believing me and said she should have known since he gave me so much attention. I said she couldn't have known and that I should have done more about it. None of this ruined our friendship and only made it stronger. In fact, after this, I moved out of my own shit house of a home which I was only at like once every 3 weeks while this was going down, and moved in with her and her mom, and she became my legal guardian. My mom signed me over. I'm not going to explain this unless it's in another post and her dad got arrested. It was a sweet victory, actually, seeing him get hauled away in his boxers. Especially since he thought he would somehow be able to hide in a huge city with only boxers on. I am better now, just turned 19 actually, and I'm glad I was able to share this with you. Sorry for the length, and sorry if it is hard to follow. Not exactly an English major now, am I? So to set the scene, at the time I am 16 years old, pretty fit, about 6'2", and that type of fearless that all 16-year-olds are. So I had just started my first job at a convenience/grocery store. Everything is going well and I'm getting along with regular customers and coworkers like I have been there for years. I am talking to a girl a year or two older than me about a person we both know, Jackie. Well, Jackie goes to the same school as my coworker and is dating my friend. We start talking about how we both got an odd vibe from her and her family. I met them briefly while at said friend's house. I then bring up that my friend called me from the bathroom of the movie theater because her dad showed up to watch the movie with them on their date, which is weird but definitely not something that is super noteworthy. We both had a small chuckle and exchanged thoughts on the awkwardness of the situation. My coworker then goes, "Oh well, each to their own," and we forget about it. Well, fast forward 3 weeks and my coworker runs into the store on her day off and demands to talk to me. We go out the back to the warehouse area and she says, "Dude, what the heck happened?" More than a little bit confused, I asked what she meant. She said there was a rumor that was spread about Jackie that sounded like what I told her, but was more sexually explicit. I told her I didn't tell anyone because I didn't think it was that interesting. She swears that she didn't tell anyone because her school took rumors very seriously and she was on thin ice at the school anyways. We think about it and she follows me around the store as I do my job, telling me more tidbits of information about the family, wanting revenge on whoever started it. Now I felt bad for Jackie. I really did. Nobody likes when a rumor is spread, but I figured since I didn't start the rumor and that my friend could have and had told a lot of our friends about it, surely it was him, right? Dead wrong. I get a call later that night from my friend telling me that Jackie had said it must have been me, and there was no other answer. Now to stress this point, she had met me once, in passing, because I was leaving when she showed up. I laugh it off, thinking that she'll message me and tell me off. I can explain the whole thing to her and how I didn't start a rumor, but told a coworker of their date. She thought it was awkward too, and we could have a few jokes about it. Once again, dead wrong. I am working a Saturday, not my usual shift, as it's about 6:30 in the morning. I thought, whatever, I could use the cash. So I accepted the switch the night before. I am in the shop by myself for the first 10 minutes and run through the checks to make sure everything is running fine for when the others get there. When I hear a knock on the door, it's Jackie. She had come in a few times to grab milk and bread and whatever, so I thought I would let her in early and we could talk about it. I open the door slightly to let her in, and Jackie's dad busts the door open from out of nowhere and follows her in. Then her mom. I politely asked how they are and what they need. Nothing but silence. I try customer service classic. Do you guys need a hand with anything? Jackie's dad erupts into an angry monologue about how I have ruined his daughter's life and how his wife is ready to divorce him unless he fixes the problem. I'm now just a little bit uneasy as he screams more and more. I decided that I could maybe take it and try to show that I'm in control. Hey, this is my story. If you're going to act like this, you can leave. I say loudly but calmly. Jackie's mom starts yelling about how they are going to kill me and that I've made a big mistake. I try telling them that I didn't do anything but state what happened, but it just got them all angrier. I have backed off to the register to put a bit of space between us. They yell some more about how they know it was me and I'll pay for it. My coworkers come in, and Zach, a new guy I was training, has walked in casually saying he called the cops and they are on their way. It was like he shot a gun. They stopped everything and ran out as fast as they could. When the cops came, they took statements but said because nothing really happened, they wouldn't do much to follow up. Fine with me. I want it over with, and if they come back, I'll let them know. They popped up every now and then to remind me that I was going to die, right up until I moved states for school. And I figured out that my friend had actually told a girl at the school, and she had embellished the story a touch, starting the rumor. So, crazy family that was bent on killing me for a rumor I didn't spread. That's not me. So this takes place in the summer of 2012, when I was just a small 12-year-old boy. Damn millennials. My brother and father had been separated since I was about 1 or 2 years old. I visited my father occasionally during the summers while I lived with my mother. For some reason, my mom believed it was a great idea to send me to my father's this summer, although at the time he didn't even have an official place to stay because he had gotten kicked out of his home a few weeks after I had gotten there. So he resorted to staying with a friend he had met at a past homeless shelter, Pete. Now, Pete's home on the surface looked decent, and even though he seemed odd, nothing rang any bells. The first night I knew something was wrong is when I fell asleep in his bed. That night I woke up with bed bug bites all over me. They were everywhere. When I first complained to my dad about the bites, Pete had gotten a bit upset and said, "My bed doesn't have any bed bugs, you must have brought them in." He was in absolute denial. Another side note, my dad left for work, leaving me alone with Peter for 8 to 12 hours a day sometimes. After a few days of being there, I started to get more restless. Pete would sometimes make suggestive comments towards me that had sexual implications, or would just refuse to let me eat anything until my dad came home. For many of those wondering why I didn't tell my dad, it was because I assumed that if we didn't stay there, we would end up living on the streets, and I would rather deal with some asshole than live in a cardboard box. However, one day I was a bit more talkative than usual. Mind you, at this time, I hadn't slept for around 21 hours and hadn't eaten for half that time. I was exhausted. The bed bug bites constantly made me itchy, and I couldn't even get much sleep. I don't remember completely how it even got to this point. All I can remember is that I was in the bathroom. I think I possibly told Pete that I was fed up with him and would tell my dad. As I closed the door behind me, he suddenly came charging in like a bull. I tried locking the door, but he wouldn't let me close it. A 12-year-old versus a grown man. I obviously didn't stand a chance, strength-wise. Now, some more prior information. My mom constantly trained and drilled into my head that adults are dangerous, that you should never get into someone's car, and, in her own words, if they ever got you in the car, play along, and then grab the steering wheel and try to crash the car. I remember going into instinct mode. I grabbed the razor he had left on the sink. Pete had been screaming things like, "You effing cunt," or "I will kill you," and other stuff like that. I remember I stupidly dropped my phone near the toilet but opened the door and slipped beneath Pete's arms. I sprinted for the door. He caught me and slammed me into the wall. I remember slicing his arm with a razor when he tried strangling me, getting up and running outside his house. He wasn't able to catch me. I made another stupid mistake. Some old guy beneath our floor kind of knew my dad and offered me to stay at his house and wait for him to get home. Guys, I know it was dumb to accept, but I was so tired and hungry. When he had made me a sandwich and gave me a blanket to sleep on his couch, I had been thinking, what if he poisoned this food or is going to try and assault me when I fall asleep? Imagine a 12-year-old kid thinking that. Next thing I knew, I fell asleep with the razor clutched in my hands. Fell asleep in a man's house who I didn't really know. Couldn't even call my dad because I didn't know his number either. My phone had fallen somewhere in his house during the scuffle. My dad had gotten home, immediately threatened Pete, grabbed our things, and we lived in a motel until I was able to go back to my mother's place. Worst summer of my life. Pete, that's not me. I met John at a party when I was 21. He was handsome and a very smooth talker. Honestly, I hated him the first time we talked. He stole my hat and refused to give it back until I gave him my number. Instead of listening to my gut, I gave in. We ended up texting back and forth and eventually decided to go out on a date. It turned out that John lived just around the corner from me. Right off the bat, he told me about his mental health issues: bipolar, OCD, depression, anxiety. He assured me that he was taking medication for all of them. I was studying psychology in college and thought my knowledge of mental health could be beneficial to our relationship. I opened up to him about my own traumas and hardships, which bonded us. After a couple of months, I started to notice something was off. He would have these grandiose ideas about our relationship and his future for about a week or two. Then, after some time, he would stop going into work. He would lie about it all day until he would finally blow up on me, telling me he was so anxious to go, he spent the whole morning throwing up. I tried to be supportive of him. I told him there were other jobs he could try out, but he would always bring it back to how little I knew about hard work. I quickly noticed his highs and lows were like clockwork. He'd cycle through every 6 to 8 weeks. I knew it was his bipolar disorder, but he'd assured me he was taking his meds. Throughout the relationship, he became extremely possessive. If a man looked at me while we were walking down the street, he would accuse me of knowing him and wouldn't talk to me for the rest of the day. He would constantly accuse me of cheating on him with every person who looked at me. Felt like I couldn't talk to men or even dress nicely because I was afraid of attracting any attention. We broke up several times throughout a 9-month period. He would say he couldn't be with me and then 2 weeks later have a list of all the things he planned on doing if I took him back. He told me all the ways he would work to improve himself and our relationship, and I trusted him. I could only take so much of the ups and downs, and when I found out he wasn't taking his medication or seeing the therapist he'd promised to see, I told him I couldn't do it anymore. He was furious. He texted me long rants about how worthless I was, how no one would ever want to be with me or connect with me. I was too privileged to ever make a difference in life. I was terrified. About 3 weeks after I ended all communication and blocked his number and social media, he began to stalk and harass me. Living so close was suddenly only convenient for him and horrible for me. One night around 3 a.m., I heard pounding on my window. I was terrified and couldn't move. The pounding grew louder and more intense. I slowly slipped out of my bed and onto the floor. It was then that he started calling my name. After about 15 minutes of fear, it was quiet. I called my mom and then the police. The police found a piece of paper tapped to my door and read scribbled lettering. It said that he knew we belonged together and that he would make sure we ended up together. I was shocked. The police told me that since the relationship was so on and off, it was my fault. I needed to be more clear about what I wanted. Throughout the next couple of months, he'd show up outside my bedroom window and watch me. I continued to call the police, who told me that I didn't need to file a report and that just calling was good enough. He also began using his friend's social media to harass me, begging me to give him another chance. He even emailed my school email to attempt to get me to talk to him. I eventually contacted the school, which personally delivered a letter to him banning him from the campus. This only made him more angry. He texted me from a friend's phone, telling me that unless I texted him back, he would come to campus whenever he wanted just to intimidate me. That was the final straw. I went to the police and filed a report. Eventually, he found a new girlfriend and the stalking stopped. However, just last week, I was taking the train and saw him staring at me from a train car. His eyes were so dark and empty. I truly hope I never see him or hear from him again. A little background on the events I'm going to write about. This all happened in mid-October. My family owns about 160 acres out in the middle of nowhere. The closest neighbor is a friend who we let rent the pasture for his cattle when he needs to. Some friends and I decided we wanted to build a little cabin out there that we could hang out at. So one weekend, one of my friends and I loaded up a tractor we were renting from his dad and headed out there. It was just me and him that weekend, as everyone else was busy. We got there a little late since it took a while to get everything loaded and packed for the weekend. He sat about setting up our tent, and I made our fire. As I did so, I made an odd discovery. There was a phone book from a few towns over, still in its plastic sleeve. Right next to that was our fire pit. I picked it up and showed it to my friend. We both enjoyed scaring ourselves, and I made the comment that we weren't alone out here. We both laughed at it. Later that night, we were sitting around the campfire talking and BSing. There was a big bright moon that night and a bit of a breeze, which made whatever leaves were left rustle. It was a little bit creepy, but we enjoyed the atmosphere. We noticed, however, somebody crossing through the middle of the field, their body just visible from the moonlight. At first, it was a little bit odd. My friend and I discussed for a few seconds if we should confront him. But I made this suggestion that he was probably just taking a shortcut across the field. Although I didn't really like it, it was a huge deal. If we caught him doing it again, then we would confront him, we decided. The rest of the night passed pretty uneventfully. We eventually got in our tent and laid down. We were probably 20 or so feet from the fire pit, which was, by that point, burning quite low. We talk for a few minutes, and then we go silent trying to fall asleep. As we are lying there, we hear something. It sounded like quiet footsteps walking around the fire pit. We both look at each other, silent. Then we hear a piece of wood get thrown in the fire, and it flames up quite a bit. I grabbed the shotgun I always kept in the tent and quickly racked it. We heard someone run away, but by the time we got out, they were too far away. The rest of the weekend was pretty quiet, and the events of the first night seemed kind of dreamy to us. We just cleared out the area for the cabin and cut and stacked the trees we cut for firewood. Next weekend we get out of there. My uncle was out there as well and went to check his game camps. This is where it got much more worrying for us. My uncle told us that he was pissed because somebody had stolen the batteries and SD cards out of the cameras. We told him about what happened the weekend before and then parted ways. When we got out there, we noticed that quite a bit of our wood we had cut and stacked was already gone, and we were the last people to camp out there, which means somebody had come out and had themselves a fire. We then went and checked on the tractor, which we had left down there. We found it had been broken into, and the chainsaw, which we left in the cab, had been stolen. To make a long story short, nothing else so far has happened. I was hesitant for a few weeks to continue with the cabin since we weren't there all the time. I was worried that it would be an incentive for whoever was to stay. I'm not sure if it was a transient or a local or whoever. If for some reason anything else happens, I'll post an update. Just wanted to update and let you guys know that we let local law enforcement and the adjacent landowners know about the situation. A friend and I also went down there and put up no trespassing signs around the property. Additionally, we had some trail cameras around the build site of the cabin, so if anyone messes around there, we can hopefully get a good picture. Thanks for all the comments, everyone, and if anything else develops, I'll be sure to let you guys know. few weeks ago, at the beginning of September, I took my best friend home to Ireland. It was her first time in Ireland and one of the few times she had left England, so she was a bit nervous, especially as, historically, Anglo-Irish relations haven't been what you would call super friendly, I guess. She was worried, but I assured her that where my family lived, at the south of the suburbs of the capital city, was very safe. We would have my family home to ourselves. All very safe. Soon we settled into living out all of her stereotypes of the Irish, eating potatoes and drinking Guinness. Late one evening on the way back from Newgrange, you should go by the way, I was having a lot of trouble with the headlights. It was a rental, so we figured it would be a good thing to stop and work out what was wrong, rather than driving without lights at night. We were near my favorite takeout, so I figured we could order dinner and figure out the car while we waited. Being a bit sensitive about looking like a complete moron, I decided to park our car in the middle of the nearly empty car park. That way, we could have a good look without a risk of being seen looking stupid. After we ordered, we stopped by the shop next door to pick up cider and milk. As you do. I'm normally oblivious to the world around me. It's actually a running joke for my friends. So I was a bit slow taking in what I seen ahead of me in the queue. 2 men. Almost identical, in every way. Dressed in army fatigues. There are no army bases near here. I've rarely ever seen the police around here. I don't know anything about the military, but I'm sure it doesn't include muddy trainers. The only part about them that wasn't identical and messy, uncut hair. Rough beards too, but I couldn't see their faces at this point. I am now staring at every detail. The fatigues were too big for the men. On the shoulder, stitched badly, was a badge for the U.S. Special Forces. They were definitely not American, but I stopped looking at their clothes when they turned so I could see their faces. There were scars all over them running right into their hairline. And blood. Definitely blood. It was streaked over their faces, as if it were splatter. I don't know how to describe it. It was dried into their skin, but it looked like as if it had recently been dripping. They purchased a huge amount of alcohol. I was pretty nervous. The cashier was nervous. My friend, she chatted away to me in her suddenly uncomfortably obvious English accent, completely oblivious. We walked out first. They were behind us. Though they paid first, Anna continued talking away. They walked silently behind. I pretended to have to stop to fix my shoes so they would at least outstrip us. And they did, walking silently to the same car park. There was a large pit in my stomach. I think my heart fell into it. There was a gray hatchback car in the parking lot, engine running. It was the only one there besides ours, and was only about 10 meters, maybe 30 feet away. Inside, though it was dark, I could make out more of these men, sitting, waiting. No music, no sound. Certainly not a party. Now, to give you an idea of where we were and where we were walking to, our car was in the middle of an abandoned dark car park with only one exit. A car park that was next to a huge, closed, unlit public park that led immediately to the Dublin Mountains. Mountains are infamous for hiding missing people. Lighting was minimal. The rental car, no working lights. The 2 men got into the car silently, but they didn't leave. The engine was still running, but they all sat, staring at us. I got into the driver's seat trying to fix the lights, constantly darting my eyes over the dark car. Anna was outside shouting encouraging directions and suggestions. She was completely oblivious and I didn't want to scare her. This was her first trip to the country and I was going to get her murdered. And that was all I could think. That is it. This is where I might die. 2 young women, completely alone, probably abducted in the middle of a nearly abandoned car park. That is it. In a red rental, tiny tin can car. This can't be real right now, dude. Are you freaking kidding me? I sat there hoping that we wouldn't meet the men that were staring at us. I was ready to scream, "Get in!" and drive out of there as fast as I could. I was shaking. Normally at this point when I read Let's Not Meet, I want to scream at the writer to call the police, and that genuinely didn't occur to me. I think at that point, I wouldn't even have remembered the emergency number for them. I tried to catch a license plate but didn't want to obviously stare at the car. What did occur to me is that we shouldn't be there. As calmly as I could, I told Anna we should pick up the food. She looked at me a bit strangely. The lights still weren't working and the food wouldn't be ready for another 20 minutes. But it was inside. It was safe. Those 5 minutes we walked across the car park, our backs to the car full of scarred, bloody men, were some of the longest moments of my life. Anna was still talking incessantly, but I could finally hear strain in her voice. When we got to the door of the takeout, we finally saw the car leave, more than 10 minutes after the men had returned to the car. This time, Anna was staring at it too. She turned to me. "That was freaking terrifying," she said.